Hi, my name is Carol Taylor. I'm a visual artist and potter and a cord artist. My book, Capturing Crime, has been shortlisted for the Margaret and John Savage First Book Award in Nonfiction. Before I say anything else, I would like to say thank you to a couple of gals, dear friends, who have encouraged this project for years. Peggy Woolsey, a New Brunswick artist, and Sandra Mitchell, a retired art teacher, who did a lot of research when I didn't have dates and names for early work. So thank you to both of them. The book is based on my court sketches from the past almost 40 years. It has a prologue by Connell Smith, who worked for ATV and CBC. A synopsis of the trials by Gray Marquis, who wrote Truth and Honor, one of the Olin books, and a piece by Rosalind Rosenfeld, who wrote the art book on Lucy Jarvis, to place my art in context with the court sketches. I'd like to read a few paragraphs from the introduction and a couple from my diary at the end. The traditional art training I received from Ted Campbell and Fred Ross of St. John enabled me to make a living as a commercial artist, first at the St. John newspapers, then at MRA's, Atlantic Canada's largest department store, as a fashion illustrator and layout person. Over the years, most of the major Canadian media, CBC, CTV, Global, Canadian Press, and the New Brunswick papers have called over the past 30 years. I've always said yes and always had a bag with sketchbook, pencils, pen, chalk ready to go. Some of the sketches have been picked up by media in England and the US, and it was surprising how many of the newspapers reproduced images from the trials. The early 80s was the start of sketching in the courts for New Brunswick and for me. I'll always remember because I received the call while I was preparing supper. I could smell the potatoes burning as the phone rang. I moved the pot off the burner, as I went by the stove and picked up the phone. A male voice introduced himself as Pat Ryan of ATV, which became CTV. He said, "I'm looking for a court artist. I asked around and everyone recommended you because you've been drawing portraits in the mall and you draw quickly. Would you be willing to give it a try?" So, of course, I said yes, and spent the evening rearranging my life so I could drive into town the next day. The judge presiding over the trial I was to cover was asked by ATV if I could use one of the media seats in the Sydney Street Courthouse. The judge said yes, so long as I remained quiet and didn't disrupt the proceedings. That was the beginning. The 80s were a busy time. I covered 48 trials, charges, and inquests. In the 90s, I covered 33. The courtroom work enabled me to further my art practice, but I did love the immediacy. It was like life drawing or using clay. I loved the challenge, especially of a charge or verdict, when the accused was only there for a few minutes. It could be hectic at the TV station if I didn't get away from the courtroom in the usual time. The camera guys would be pulling them out of my hands as I tried to finish coloring them just to get them ready for air. Sometimes the news was already being started. Dave Hallahan, cameraman at CBC, usually was annoyed with me because I tended to draw to the edges of whatever surface I was using. That was my training. And it made the camera job difficult. However, I would like to add a special thanks to Dave because he would date the drawings and nagged me into remembering to note the who, what, when, and where of the trials I covered. If only he had been with me from the beginning, then some of the early mysteries regarding years and names wouldn't have happened. I also remember Brian Shotgun Morris, the cameraman from CTV, who continuously moved his camera over the image, zooming in and out slowly as if it were a live video in the courtroom itself. Over the years, I began to use an ochre-colored paper for CTV and white for CBC, so that they would have a different look, especially when I covered the same trial for both. This period brought a lot of changes and innovations as technology developed. A sketch from January 20th, 1989 shows the first video shown in New Brunswick. It's Stu Ellis of the Identification Branch at the Hampton Courthouse with a huge monitor and a huge player with double reels of tape. I remember distinctly, though, the darkened room and the flapping of the film. The Legier trial was also notable because CBC sold the rights to CTV to use sketches before I colored them. It added a hectic addition to my job because during the mid-afternoon break, the CTV guys would tape the drawings to the side of their white van, video them, take them down, hand them to me, and I would tear into the Fredericton CBC station in Anna's little car. Day after day, rain or shine, sometimes umbrellas over the drawings, fingers crossed they wouldn't get wet. I'm not sure this would have happened in a large competitive city. I thought maybe it was a New Brunswick thing. Then, the ubiquitous courtroom object was the water pitcher and glasses on each desk. Now it's monitors, screens, large overheads for the jury and general public, as well as smaller laptops for each person taking part, judge, lawyers, defense, and accused. Other changes include the court buildings themselves. Thankfully, all these old buildings, notably the neoclassical Sydney Street Courthouse in St. John, built in 1824, the Northumberland County Courthouse in Miramichi City, Newcastle, built 1912, and the 1873 Hampton Courthouse have all been repurposed and not torn down. The most difficult courtroom was St. Andrew's. Small, with the usual Victorian layout, I was given a seat facing the end of the high seating arrangement for prisoners and had to peek around the corner of a wooden barrier to see the judge and lawyers. But I do think the sketches help the general public have a close-up personal view of what's taking place, and that helps captivate the TV audience, keeps them interested as the story unfolds. Now, the diary that we printed in the book, as is, I think when you're writing your diary, you're not thinking about grammar or spelling or tense. You're just making notes of what is taking place so that you can keep track of people and the places and the times. So I was in St. John this day watching a rehearsal of Mary Stillwell, who was playing Miss Hannigan. She's another friend who's always been supportive. When it was over, I left the Imperial about 10:30, gathered my sketchbook and pencils, and left, clutching my coat against the wind. I decided to drive straight down Princess Street toward the bay. Almost at the bottom, the car phone burbled. "Where are you?" Jerry asked. I tell him where. The newspaper called, "Dave Stonehouse needs you to call back." I thought at first it was something wrong with his column that he's written for many years, but it wasn't. I told Jerry I was heading to the lights, the causeway, and would pull into the TJ parking lot, and he could give me their number then. I did, and he did. I called the newsroom. Mark Ipe answered and said he would let me in. He's such a gentleman. He was out to the car by the time I got myself together. It's cold out, but hot and dry inside. I find Oland has been arrested at the car wash in Quispam. The DJ is trying to get images off the security camera and having trouble. Could I cover the charge Wednesday at 2 p.m.? And of course, I say yes. And I wondered if the new chambers had media seats like the old Sydney Street Courthouse. But they don't know. And they don't. And so it went. The day was a mess. Every time we went to the courthouse, they changed the time. We'd have to leave and then come back. And so it went. Thank you very much for listening to all this. I would like to say at the end a special thank you to Mr. Mitchell of New World Publishing, who was enthusiastic about the book from the very beginning, and to Atlantic Book Awards for the honor of being nominated. Goodbye.